Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Whiskey Review with me, Jeff. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at another Japanese whiskey, this one being Nikka Whisky from the Barrel. Now, Nikka is one of the kind of big two Japanese distilling companies. The first one being Suntory, which you've probably heard of if you know anything about Japanese whiskey, and the second is Nikka. Those were, kind of spawned from the two forefathers of Japanese whiskey. I'll see if I can get another history episode that kind of dives more into that specifically, because there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of facts I could go into. I want to try to keep this one shorter. So for now, just know that this is Nikka. They're one of the top two. This is coming in at 51.4% ABV. And this is actually a blend of over 100 different batches of both malt and grain whiskeys that they blend together and then kind of marry or mature in a used oak barrel for another 2 to 3 months. There isn't really a lot of information that at least I could find on my quick search with this one. Beyond that, it's a blended whiskey, so there's just a lot that kind of goes into that blend. I don't know the specific age. I don't really know, the different makeup of this one specifically, but just know it's a Japanese blend. It's 51.4%. It comes from Nikka. So this is kind of regarded as, one of the kind of the higher quality Japanese offerings, especially from Nikka. I know they've got a coffee grain one, which is spelled differently than kind of what you're thinking of the coffee, the drink. It's named after the still that was used, but they have a couple other different offerings. Nikka does the Yoichi brand, if you're familiar with that one. But this is, again, touted as kind of one of their better ones. So I have tried this, I think, once or twice before, just little pours. We're going to try it again here. If you don't know my channel at all, what I'll do is I'll grade the nose, the palate, the finish, and the value all from a 0 to 10, and then just kind of give it an average after that. All right, let's get into this here. I like this bottle shape. It's definitely unique. On their website, it says that they picked a specific, simple kind of cubic bottle shape to represent, I believe it's like a block of whiskey, which I don't know if that's a translation thing or, that's a specific Japanese idea or something, but that was what, says on their website there. All right, so we'll look at the color, even though I'm not grading it, but it's, definitely kind of a lighter color. It does have maybe just a little bit more caramel color to it than like a really light Scotch would. And if you don't know a lot about Japanese whiskeys, a lot of their stuff is going to be kind of modeled after the Scotch whiskey, system or kind of their processes. So it's going to be usually a malt whiskey. They don't use a lot of other things, although they're experimenting a little bit more now. It's definitely lighter in color, but it's not like a super, super light Scotch. All right, let's go in for the nose here. So even though this is a mix of malt and grain whiskeys, I'm definitely getting that kind of malt, not dustiness, but kind of that just very malt forward, barley forward smell on the nose here. It's pretty good. Yeah, this is definitely coming off to me as kind of like a lighter Scotch, no kind of peat or anything like that, but you can definitely tell it's mostly barley, or at least I would think it is. And then you get, a little bit of caramel in there, a little bit of butterscotch. There's definitely some baking spices coming through. Again, probably not as much as there would be with, let's say, a bourbon, because they usually tend to run a little high on that baking spice note. A lot of the malt whiskeys tend to be more of that kind of grain forward and less to do about the baking spices. But that's a pretty good nose. Let's go in for the taste. Cheers, guys. So on first sip here, the palate is very good. I'm getting a lot of sweetness coming off of kind of the beginning of this. There's a lot of caramel, like butterscotch and toffees, which, again, if you know me, I like, or at least prefer sweeter whiskeys usually. And this one's definitely kind of hitting those brighter, kind of more light, lively notes, at least in the beginning of the palate here. There's also a little bit of, I don't know if you've ever had a Mizunara oak finished whiskey. Mizunara is a type of Japanese wood that some Japanese whiskeys finished in, and it gives it this really unique, I don't even know how to describe it, but just a different type of taste going on that you can usually pinpoint as Mizunara oak. And again, being that it's blended and doesn't really discuss or disclose a lot of, the specifics with this one. I don't know that it was finished or that any of the blends that this came from were finished in Mizunara oak or were aged in Mizunara oak, but that's just kind of the vibe or the taste I'm getting off of this one. But yeah, I really like this one because I do like the Japanese profile, or the little bit I've had of Japanese whiskeys. I do like that profile. It's kind of similar to Scotch, but it's kind of also doing its own thing. And with this one, it's one of the few Japanese whiskeys that I've had that's kind of up over that 43-45% alcohol content, which to me just helps deliver on that flavor quite a bit more. Sometimes that ethanol can overpower some of the flavors if it's too high or just too hot, but I think this proof is just perfect for this one right here. All right, so now let's grade the nose. Let's go back to this. Yeah, like I said, going back to it here, it's just a lot of kind of light, grainy, sweet notes going on. There's the caramel, butterscotch, toffee. There's kind of that little bit of like a field, that barley and grain going on. And again, like I said, it's not super heavy on baking spice, but I can tell there is a little bit there. So, it's not just like a syrupy sweetness. It's got a little bit of depth there too. Yeah, that's a pretty pleasant nose. It's nothing that completely blows me away, but it's pleasant enough. I'm gonna give the nose a good solid 7. All right, so that leaves us with the palate here. Let's grade that. Yeah, this is just a really good sipper. I definitely wouldn't necessarily blend this with anything or even really make a highball necessarily. It's definitely nuanced enough where you're gonna wanna just sip it neat, try and pick out all the different flavors and appreciate this for what it is. There's a stigma sometimes with blended whiskeys that, or even grain whiskeys, anything that has grain whiskey in it, that it's just not as high a quality sometimes as like a single malt Scotch would be or something like that. But honestly, this having over 100 different batches of different whiskeys in it, it takes a pretty refined taste and palate to kind of come up with something that is very specific to what they're going for. And what they put in this bottle, I'm really enjoying so far. Yeah, even though the ethanol is there, again, it doesn't overpower. It's light, it's sweet. As far as a Japanese whiskey goes, I think this is a super good example of how it's very similar to Scotch, but again, it does its own thing. It's got kind of enough of a difference where it's in a different category altogether. Like if I were to drink this, I wouldn't necessarily immediately think Scotch. I would think either, a single malt of some kind. I would think probably like a malt whiskey of some kind or a blend. I'm really digging the palate on this one. I'm gonna give it a good solid 8 just because of how much I like this. All right, so that brings us to the finish. And again, that's the flavors that kind of linger after you've had it and whether they stick around for a long time or whether they dissipate really quickly. So the finish on this one actually is fairly long, and I'm kind of impressed and surprised just because the proof isn't super high. And after kind of the initial drink or sip, those baking spices really kind of come out toward the end there. I get a lot of like clove and black pepper. It's, not necessarily buried, but a little bit hidden in the beginning with all that sweet kind of light flavors going on. The end is where you get more of the baking spices. Not so much cinnamon, but I'm getting definitely some clove and cardamom. It's a pretty good finish, and like I said, it's decently long too. I'd be willing to give the finish a good solid 7 on this one. All right, so now we're down to the value, and that's usually where it gets kind of tricky as far as, whether it's easy or not for me to grade these, because the other things are pretty easy, but value, a lot of people have different opinions. Again, I look at the price, I look at the availability, I look at what I think you're getting for the price, and this one kind of falls in the middle, I think. If you're looking to get this one, a 750 milliliter, kind of standard US bottle is going to run you somewhere between $80 to $90. It might be a little bit more than that if, it's kind of a highly populated, marked up area, but usually you can find it from the $80 to $90 region. And I know this is somewhat allocated as far as I understand. I know Japanese whiskey had a boom, like I said, maybe 5, even upwards of 10 years ago. I don't know if it was that long ago, but Japanese whiskey, everyone kind of got on board with that. They realized there's some good stuff being put out for not a ton of price. And then the price all of a sudden went up once that demand started growing. So Again, you're gonna be paying a little bit more now for Japanese whiskeys, but this one I think knocks it out of the park for just a very straight, tried and true Japanese whiskey with a little bit higher proof. You're not gonna wanna have this as a daily sipper. It is a little bit more expensive, but I think the value is definitely there. You know, this doesn't taste like a cheap whiskey, all right? It doesn't taste like, you know, something that you should only pay 30, 40 bucks for. This definitely comes off as a premium whiskey in my opinion. Again, the allocation or the availability might knock this down a little bit as far as the value goes, because I know you can't find it everywhere. I think for me, Total Wine is probably like the best shot I've got of getting this. I actually got this bottle as part of a trade from someone in a whiskey group. So, you know, it's kind of one of just those opportunities that I was able to try it, and I thought, I've heard of it, I've heard good things about it, might as well. So again, 80 to 90 bucks, somewhat allocated or somewhat hard to find. I think it's definitely worth the money, so I'm not gonna ding the value too much. We're gonna give it a 7 on this one. All right, so that leaves us with the total, and the average total for this one scored a 7.25 out of 10, which I know is definitely one of the higher ones so far I think that I've scored. I think this is a fantastic bottle. Again, you are paying a little bit more, but you know, being that it's imported, being that it's a blend of so many different whiskeys, the proof is up there. So if you're looking for a type of Japanese whiskey or a good example of a Japanese whiskey, and you don't want to kind of go bottom of the barrel, you want something a little bit nicer, I would spring for this if you can find it. Again, they also have some other different you know, expressions of Nikka. There's the coffee grain, there's the yoichi, there's I don't know how many different kinds, but they have quite a few different expressions, and I'm gonna keep a lookout for them to see if I can, you know, maybe try some of those in the future and see what those are all about. But this one's both simple and complex, which I know kind of sounds confusing, but it's simple enough of an expression of Japanese whiskey that, you know, if you're not really looking to pick it apart, you're gonna enjoy it. But it's complex enough that if you are looking to pick it apart and just sip it and enjoy it, it's got enough going on that you can do that. And again, you know, I think if you pay $80 to $90 for this and just kind of every once in a while crack it open, see if it's changed a little bit, share it with friends, this is gonna be a good bottle that, you know, you can have around for a while. So thank you guys for watching, I really appreciate it. Again, I'm gonna try to ramp up the number of videos coming out. I kind of had a little bit of a hiatus where I got busy, but I'm really trying to put out new content for you guys. So thanks again for watching, cheers, keep on sipping.